Hey there fellow creators, Ben here from Cinder Studios, and this week I want to talk about compositional thumbnails for landscapes. Stick around. Now when it comes to drawing or painting landscapes, a lot of people think, oh well, I'm just going to go right in and just start right away. But there's one part of the process which a lot of people skip over, and is, in my opinion, one of the most integral and vital parts of not just landscapes, but all art in general, and that is thumbnail sketches. Now, if I'm unsure about what I'm doing going into a project, a thumbnail sketch for me can be a great way to, one, hammer out the rough ideas, and two, sometimes just find those ideas in the first place. So today I'm going to be taking you through the two versions of thumbnails that I do, usually one before the other, and how do I utilize them, hopefully so you guys can learn from that and find a way to adapt that into your work as well. Now, before we get started right into the sketchbook, I do want to set this aside and talk about an art book in particular that really kind of helped shape my idea of thumbnails when I was in college. This is called The Skillful Huntsman. This book was created by fellow YouTube artist and also really awesome design professor out in California, Scott Robertson. He has a YouTube channel here that I really like, though he doesn't upload often. A number of years ago, he had these three students, Mike Yamada, Kang Lee, and Felix Yoon, that they decided to work on this project together. It essentially takes the Grimm brothers fairy tale, The Skillful Huntsman, and turns it into a concept art book. So it's like, what would this look like if you turned it into like a bunch of concept sketches for a movie or something like that? So, you know, original story, and then just all kind of different basic sketches, and eventually towards the end you get sort of larger, more completed concepts. But each section talks about like the people and the worlds. I'm sure you guys can see some distinct influence in my work with the little people with all of these. That's in many ways where a lot of that came from for me. But most notably, I come back to this book for this section called The Travels, which has the series of thumbnails and sketches in this book. So I always really love looking at this. These are a little bit more detailed than what I would personally do in my sketchbook. And in this case, this is a little bit more line work heavy. But there's all kind of these really awesome smaller concepts which really help build out this world. And that's something I really, really enjoy seeing. This particular section here, this forest, this is another one. You can see just all of these mostly pretty outlandish and more abstract leaning shapes. But this simple idea I really carried into my work through college and beyond to get a process that is, for me at least, a little bit more refined. Now my process of thumbnails is starting to vary a little bit. For a piece like this, which I have, at least at the time, had a much more clear idea of what I wanted, I will just go straight into the larger thumbnail phase. For earlier projects, I'm more known for all of these tiny little ones, and that's what we're going to go ahead and start with. Now, if you're going to follow along, I have three of my regular sketch pens off to the side here. I have the Precise V5. If you're looking for just a regular, nice, standard sketch pen, check out my video talking about all kind of. I reviewed a whole mess of different sketch pens, like 17, 18 different sketch pens. But this is one of my all-time favorites currently. So we're going to be using that to start. I also have a Micron Graphic 3. I specifically love using this because it has a nice chisel tip, and you'll understand more of that as we get into it. And I also have a Pentel Pocket Brush Pen, which I load with brown walnut ink. If you ever used one of these before, it comes with a cartridge of black. When that's empty, you can rinse it out, clean it, and then load these with any kind of dye or water-soluble inks. No pigment inks, though, that will clog the mechanism. So starting things out, I like to lay myself down basically a variable grid of all of these little boxes, and they are, in the most basic sense, a true sort of thumbnail sketch. They are literally about the size of my thumb up to the first knuckle. A little bigger, a little smaller. I vary them depending on, thinking about longer canvases versus shorter ones. And I like to stagger them kind of like bricks, so they actually, the page visually looks a little bit nicer. Now the method for this, I actually heard recently referred to as the dot-to-dot method. So, 2 dots and then just connect the line between them. For the vertical it's not as necessary, but, something like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect, no one's, criticizing how good you draw boxes or anything like that. But that's really all I do for these. I'm just going to go ahead and round out this page here right now. Okay, so that's a nice page of, well, almost page. I had some notes to myself there before, of all of these different boxes. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can approach mini thumbnails. I actually picked this method up from an artist by the name of Dylan Pierpont. He's a professional working, I think, for Microsoft. Could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on it. But and when I talked to him about it, he's like, "Oh, I just stole it from a professor of mine." So it's one of those things that just like gets passed around between artists here and there, and each artist adds sort of their own element and finds a way to make it their own, which I'm hoping you guys can do as well. So for these, at least for myself, I usually start with, I do 2 layers. Now you can just do one with, quick sketch lines or, thicker, bolder marker or something. I actually like to utilize 2 different layers. I use the walnut ink and then I use the chisel tip graphic 3. And really all I'm looking for most of the time is to block out positive and negative space. Now, sometimes I'll go in blind. Sometimes I'll go in with some kind of a prompt, like castles or things hidden in the forest. I'm actually going to go ahead and open the book up, and I think there's cities or something in here somewhere. There's the forest. There's transports, travels. I'll open up the travels. I want to use some of this as, at least for me, just a jumping off point. I'm not copying anything one-to-one, but checking out other people's art, and I'm always super inspired by some more like digital fantasy painters and stuff like that. So I like to be able to use some of that as a base, just to kind of get my imagination flowing a little bit. And again, I might pull like one tiny element out and then flesh it out somehow, or just general shapes and stuff like that. If you have trouble getting started, that's definitely a great way to get yourself moving. Look up some artists and paintings and compositions of what they have done, and just kind of use that as a jumping off point. So I like the idea, at least in the back of my head, of some like things like cities or temples hidden among other larger landscapes. So that's kind of what I'm at least in the back of my mind thinking of right now. So I'll kind of start with just, whatever shape I kind of have an idea for. And, sometimes it can be, again, if you're doing this like a 2-layer technique, you can think about it as like the next layer up being like closest foreground, and you can just, multiple layer it that way. Or you can go as far as using, your upper one layer as like a sky layer or something, like go like sun and then like create some cloud shapes or something like that. A light horizon, and then build something on top of that. So there's a couple different, ways you can utilize that, as long as you're, the 2-color method. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to like force out every detail. Sometimes just the shape of the brush can be a great way, or the shape of the brush pen, the shape of the pen can be a great way to just find things and stuff like that. Now, if you're sketching from a photo, sketching from life, I would jump to the next step with the larger thumbnails. But for the minis, this is a great way to like just play with sort of abstract shapes and maybe, work out some stuff in your imagination to find different things and to find, what you might want to work on. At least that's how it works for me. Again, feel free to adapt this and pull a piece of this technique out and use it in some way that benefits you and benefits your work. And I have found that like if the simpler I try to keep the shapes, the more things I can sort of find within them. It might not be perfect every time, There are days where I have done pages and pages and pages and pages of these before I find even a single idea that I really like. But it's again, it's sort of a great warm-up exercise for a variety of different ideas and painting styles and everything like that. And if you have a more concrete idea to start, there's a chance that you'll maybe be able to discover something a little bit more interesting just by keeping your brain just thinking about other things. Simple. Sometimes it's as easy as just throwing down some simple perspective lines and finding something in that. And what's fun too is oftentimes I find that like one idea can like bounce off of another. Like, oh, I like that element in that one, so I'll try it in this one, but maybe in a like take it from the larger rectangle back to the square, and then take that thing back and up and over again. Lots of different ways to find small little unique ideas and just build off of them for yourself. I think that's good to start. So from here, again, you can go straight into the black. You can actually go back and forth a little bit depending on which layer you want to lay down first. So from here, I'll go in with the chisel tip and find sort of those bigger, bolder foreground elements. And then usually throw a tiny, tiny indication of a figure somewhere, real small way in there. But this allows me to build out, some framing. Sometimes I'll go over shapes that I already have to maybe indicate where certain things will be. I will turn it on its side for some quick thin lines, but not trying to detail anything too much. And it is very easy to overwork with the heavier black, especially if we're doing this 2-layer method. But I do find that simply having a larger sort of tipped tool for a smaller image, in this case, really forces you to think about shapes rather than to think about details. If I was working larger scale, you think about something like maybe something the size of this page, but using like something like a big brush width like this. You got to be able to force yourself into thinking about shapes and space rather than just simply details and rendering. As fun as that the detailing phase can be, if you don't have the basic shapes out first, you're going to run into often more problems than you would have otherwise. Yeah, I do find that sort of the black lines can be great for adding the ideas of where you want that perspective lines and everything like that. But yeah, it's gonna be a little different for everyone, depending on your subject matter and what you sketch and how you sketch and what your vision is. Tons of different factors to consider, especially when working with different things. But if you're starting with trying to find an idea or just starting with something kind of basic, simply being able to just find other shapes in things is a great way to jumpstart the creativity and find those different ideas. And much like I showed in the book, like you could do this entire process with a much thinner pen, but I do find blocking out those shapes and finding the limits of the positive and negative space forces you into a point of understanding the larger composition as a whole. Go that way with that. Perspective lines there, and maybe some big trees or something in that. Like it can really change between first layer and second layer, or it can stay relatively the same depending on again your goals and anything you're worried about, anything you want to mess with. frame the viewer's eye in different ways. I want to mark that. And a lot of this has a lot to do with experience as well. I don't expect you guys to be sketching on this level right out of the gate. I have a certain approach to this and confidence with my line work that, again, I have sketchbooks going back, 15 years roughly, of doing this over and over and over again for like every month of the year. So it's like if you're struggling a little bit trying to find like how do I like mine doesn't look like his, do this a lot, and you will find yourself creating all of those little spaces in between. And oh, what if I do this way? What if I do it this way? It's like, oh, maybe that actually looks like a pipe, or maybe that looks like a a rooftop or something. You'll find that as you do more and more of these, that you will discover things within them. And if you're a landscaper like me, or you do something more abstract and you're just looking for even bigger, broader abstract shapes, you'll start to recognize patterns in your own work, which can then be utilized in the thumbnail phase to then generate more ideas or refine your ideas down a little bit more. Yeah, that one's pretty rough. I don't like anything about that. Might just be a rock and a figure or something. This I want to maybe let sit out a little. And then sometimes I'd come back with other elements or something in the background and realize it needs a little bit more. So from this stage, I often find myself finding the ones that I like. And as I find, one or two that I like out of it, I'll, put a star or a dot or something next to it and be like, I'm going to come back to this one and do something a little bit more with it. And that's when we get to the larger thumbnail phase. So on a fresh blank page, and if you're going to do this, especially in a spiral-bound sketchbook, this is why I would also recommend not working on the backs of your pages, because you will find yourself needing to flip. Think about simple flipbook animations, same process of being able to look back and forth at something real fast. So again, finding something I like, actually really like this one here. As soon as sort of a oasis trading post in the desert. Think if you guys played the recent Zelda games, something like I can't remember what it's called, but the Karakara Bazaar. It's the stopping point on your way through the desert where there's an oasis and a little shop there. I was think about that a little bit in terms of design. Not quite exactly, but that's visually kind of what I'm thinking here. So based on the mini thumbnail, this one's kind of long and skinny, similar to like a I would say like a 12 by 36 the way I would similarly use in my studio. So at this point, I'm again boxing out something much larger. You usually like to go to about like half to a third of the page, and this is a little 5 by 7 inch sketchbook, so not quite a thumbnail at this point. A little bit more, couple of fingers worth. And we go from there. Now, this can be a great process as well if you're, studying from life, trying to find out a composition, even like something as simple as a portrait or a still life at this point. We are similarly going to be talking about like shape and space here, but not to the extreme degree that we did so with the minis. A lot of times if I'm studying from life, I'm bypassing the frame and using the entire page, something like this, which I did a couple of weeks ago. I was just out on a hiking trail, stopped at a nice overlook point and sketched the city a bit. Wish I had spent a little bit more time with this, as well as had a bigger sketchbook, but you know, it is what it is. Because I use a relatively small sketchbook, this could, in theory, act as, you know, a small sketch or a thumbnail. In theory, I should have given myself at least some kind of an edge here to at least mentally tell myself, hey, you have a limit to this composition. But my mistakes are not really what this one is about. Instead, we're talking about the larger thumbnail phase. So for this, again, I'm going to flip back and forth a bit here, and mostly I'm just kind of outlining those shapes. And if you were studying from life, that's kind of what I did here as well. Like you can see the looser lines here. I was just capturing like where are the basic lines, where these are like, it's a shoreline of bushes and trees. But I'm just looking for how big is that shape and where I need to place everything in that. So same thing can be done here. Of course, because I'm working from my own sketch, the need for details and accuracy is up to my own discretion. So I usually start with the horizon. Just gonna give myself that base. And sort of late into this, I put this sun. If I'm not doing a sun that is specifically in the piece, I'll use this actually little indication. It's a circle with 2 arrows and a line, kind of like an arrow, more or less. I can't remember what artist I picked that up from, but it is wildly useful. And this is kind of like like a multi-mountain range back here. So I'll just kind of... And a lot of times I'm working on my lap, so I'll be able to fold this back or something, but like once I get the bigger lines taken care of, you know, just kind of scribble that out a little. And then this is a really wild shape. So I can let myself let this be kind of whatever I want, really. Some kind of a big rock formation, not really sure. I like the back and forthness to that. Maybe throw a little cutout into here. And some like tents and things. Some rocks out here. I got a nice little overlook cliff face, which I love putting them in my work. Something like that. Now from here, I can actually go through and find a few more details and renders in this. Depending on when and where I'm working, and the composition in particular, I'll add, you know, some of the gray here and there. I'm actually going to hold off on using that for a second. And then minimally at the end, we'll use the graphic 3. But mostly I'm just playing with that overall idea, and then primarily light and shadow here because of where the sun is. You know, the mountains in the back are probably going to be darker on top for, you know, pushing that silhouette. And then working that down. And again, not looking for specific details. There is a video, an old art video from some channel I can't even remember at this point, but that artist talked a lot about what he called the illusion of detail. So there's a lot that, and I've been taking this into account a lot lately in my work as well. Is you don't have to render out every single shape, every blade of grass. I mean, you can, and it's, you know, it's fine if that's what you want to do. But I will say that the human brain has a fantastic way of filling in the gaps and, you know, making things up for you. Yeah, I like this as an archway. That, a couple of quick lines for a path or a staircase or something. Again, because I know what I want with my work, I'm much faster at this than I think a lot of you guys probably would be. But you know, quick cross hatching, you know, simple little wrist movements to lay out those ideas of value. Occasionally I'll put some more, you know, detailed shapes in, but mostly, again, looking for just large overarching shapes, playing with lines, playing with those ideas of perspective, and seeing where all of that sits. Yeah, a couple of rocks here and there. Maybe it's like the remnants of a dormant volcano or something in the back, and there's like, that's why it's all jaded and scattered. You know, a landscape that has since dried up. It's almost like a Dr. Seuss rock. It's like really kind of curving out. You know, maybe it won't be a rock. Maybe it'll be something more man-made. I'll, you know, or man-made structures on top of, you know, otherwise somewhat natural forms. I think another weird example is, this doesn't quite qualify for the size of this structure, but in Avatar: The Last Airbender, if anyone has seen the original animated series, when they get to the desert, or just before the desert, there's this little oasis town that I think is actually based off of the bar in Star Wars. But regardless of those origins, I'm thinking a lot about that, like this stop-off point in the middle of the desert. You know, what would this look like? How would this like? I'm turning this thing into a much bigger city now. But like, how would the people here have adapted to turn it into something that is more usable and more specific? So because I fleshed that out now, the composition's a little out of balance, so I gotta maybe add some other elements in here, a couple of towers or things to offset that. This is lighter this way, so these lines will be smaller. I do want to keep them bolder, keep the line weight up so that pops out. So from here, because I have enough ink laid down, I can use the brush pen to pull some of that ink around, which is why I use the walnut ink in my brush pens in the first place. And at this point, I'm using the walnut ink sort of as my midtones a little bit. I'm not going to touch the sky with this, but I'm kind of working the extra tones in here as I need to. Which is why one of the reasons why I like working with ink, but also the limitations of ink are strictly black and white, and adding a third value can really go a long way. Similarly, if you're working on like a tone tan or a tone gray sketchbook, I would encourage you guys, if you're working with ink, to pick up like either a white liner pen or like a white colored pencil, or white charcoal is usually what I opt for if I'm using a tan sketchbook. I'm going to let that be a little darker. And then this, I'm going to actually redarken with more ink so I can pull that around. Yeah, just get it a little bit darker there on that upper face. And I originally was going to put the figures up there, but I actually don't think they're going to really work in that sense. So I'm actually going to put them down in here. And then perspective shading for the shadows. And if it ends up being a sketch that I really... Oh, that's not the right cap for that, is it? If it ends up being a sketch that I really like, and this one I definitely seem to, I might need a little bit more iterations or a digital sketch to really, for me to really figure that out, especially sort of the more the details up in the structure. And usually, as I'm working on it, I have probably come up with a name for it, a name for the piece if it would become a piece. I've been using the term desert stop-off a lot, so I'm probably going to go, let's say, wasted wasteland, something like that. Wasteland outpost. Wasteland outpost. That works. I was going to say, like, with volcanic, I don't need to make it crazier than it is. In thinking about this piece, this would be like deep sunset. I could, add, my other ideas like late sunset, dark edges. Because in its current state, it looks very bright, but if, adding color notes or something like that. Okay, anyway, I'm getting a little carried away here. So from here, this is where I will grab the Graphic 3, and I will actually give this borders. If I put thick borders around any sketch, for me, that's an indication of I like this one enough that I could paint it. If I leave it loose like this, it's like, yeah, it's not even worth doing. I'm just tracing over those lines again, not trying to be perfect. Like so, and if I really, really like it, I'll put a star by it, but I like this enough to border it, but not enough to put a star by it. And that is simply my thumbnail process. So again, if you're doing any kind of landscape stuff in particular, I do highly recommend giving the thumbnail process a try. Whether you're going straight into the larger one like this, or you are starting with more freeform, smaller mini thumbnails, it is a great way to help generate ideas and nail down a more cohesive composition. So whether you are using compositional thumbnails to generate ideas or to simply refine an idea you already have, I'm hoping me showing this process today has inspired you guys to pick up a pencil or pen and make yourselves some new landscapes and compositions for yourself. If you're struggling with ideas, your favorite art book, or just some sort of, scroll through Instagram or Pinterest, not all day, but enough to get some ideas moving, pull some elements from those pieces that you really like, and use that as a jumping off point for getting yourself started with some thumbnails. Remember that thumbnails aren't exclusive just to landscape work either. First time you're working on a portrait, or trying to figure out exactly how to arrange things in a still life on your particular canvas or drawing, it's a great way to kind of get an idea of where and how to work with that composition. Composition is key when it comes to all kind of different art, but especially for landscapes. And the more you work in the thumbnail process, I can guarantee you will find some fantastic new ideas in your work. So I'm curious if you guys utilize thumbnail sketches in your work, or has this video inspired you to maybe start doing more preparatory sketches before you take anything to canvas, paper, wood, whatever you happen to be working on. Regardless of how you approach the creative process, again, I think thumbnails are a great way to give yourself a good foundation before you get started on a piece. Even if it's something going to be more freeform, or you don't really know where you're going to go with this piece, heck, you can even do a thumbnail sketch halfway through. Just be like, is this idea heading in the right direction? Well, let's find out. Okay, it's not quite, but I can refine the sketch and then get back to the canvas to keep expressing myself and the stories that I want to create in that work. So if you learned anything in this video, enjoyed this, or just love hearing me talk about art stuff, go ahead and hit the like button. Let me know your thoughts and comments below. Get subscribed if you're not already, and this has been from Cinder Studios, and I will see you guys next time. Oh, stay inspired. I'm supposed to say that too. And keep on creating. That's in that as well.